All right. Just as a heads up, my internet's been going out randomly all day, so it's been fine the last 3 hours, so I think it's fine now. But if I freeze or if I go dark or it kicks it, what'll happen is it'll just kick everybody out. I'll try to bring it back up. I think it'll be fine. But it's happened with clients today too, which is unfortunate. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Tonight, I want to talk about a couple of things. Let me get to my right screen. When I do these classes, I don't always know like how many people are gonna show up. And so I kind of wait to see because sometimes if there's a lot of us, we'll break into groups and do things because it's just easier to do. But if there's not a lot of people, which there's not a ton tonight, we just usually have some discussion time together. So that's probably what we'll do tonight because we don't have a lot of people joining, which is fine. I'm going to talk about a couple of assignment related things here at the beginning. Um, Try to pull that up real quick. I want to talk about this third assignment that's due a week from, like a week from Friday, I believe. Week from tomorrow. So let me talk about that really quickly. Um, there's a question on. Someone asked me that I can't. I don't think anybody here asked me this, but someone did. They asked me a question about this assignment. There's a question on the assignment that I want to talk about really quickly. And it is the third question: what model of family ministry would fit the church you would now attend? Describe how it would work. And the question was like, are there models of family ministry? If you go online and you wanted to Google that, you would find uh, what different people have said are models of ministry. Like, is it family centered? Is it only kind of leaning towards marital ministry? Is it more leaning towards kids? Like what? Like there's actual models out there, but not like here's the models and choose one. It's more kind of like here's what we've come up with. Does that make sense? Like it's kind of like based on the church where people are. It's kind of like that. And so how I'm viewing that question, I'm just telling you, um, this is how I view it. It's kind of an opinion, right? It's you saying, hey, in my church, I think the model would be best if it was this way, whatever that is. And there, so in essence, for the first part of that question, there's not like a right or wrong answer, right? Whatever you think is going to be okay. Um, the biggest part is describing how it would work. That's probably the more important part of the question. And so I just wanted to point that out because someone did ask a question. And the more I got to thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good question because it's not real clear in the question itself what I'm asking. And so I just wanted to talk about that really quickly. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any question about that?
No, because I thought it was based on your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I did take a look at the book. Just I didn't think that there was anything like that, but the book doesn't have anything like that either.
No.
Yeah, the book didn't have anything.
Mm-mm.
Not really.
No.
That's why I was asking. I was just like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Michelle, was it you that asked
that
the
was me.
question? Okay. I couldn't remember. I just thought it was a good question. I wanted to bring it up.
That was me. I
I'm
wanted, yeah, I forgot to ask it over about 2 weeks ago, and I was like, let
yeah.
me ask this question in case
No,
something,
yeah.
and I can't get
No,
on Zoom.
no, it's a good question. It's really your opinion. I mean, pretty much this whole idea is your opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea of family ministry is your opinion. Now you're going to base it off of your theology, what fits your church,
Mhm.
the culture of your church. So they'll be all different, right? There'll be different flavors of that. And so basically, like this whole course is kind of opinion based to a certain extent. Now, like I said, if you go online, you will find what other people have said. Here's here's a model, and this is why. But that's them developing their own models of family ministry. Just like when I, way back long ago in the early 90s, when I was in youth ministry, there was a movement to really define youth ministry, which in the 80s, there wasn't like a definition per se, as much as just get a bunch of adults together with teenagers and hang out. That was kind of like what you did. And then as we went along, we started defining it more specifically so that you learned here's, there's different ways to do things. And so it's not very different, much different than that. So it's basically what you think. And so I just wanted to talk about it. I thought it would be important to bring up. I think the other questions on there are pretty self-explanatory. I think this assignment, there's a couple of things I actually want to talk about tonight. So you might get a little, those of you in the class tonight are going to get a little jump start on the assignment. We're going to talk about a couple of these things tonight. And I'm giving full disclosure. I worked in churches for a while before I did clinical practice. And I've partnered with churches since then, like multiple times. Like I currently have done some work with a church that's actually in Keller. When we used to live in Keller, I actually started seeing clients coming from this specific church, and then I got a ton of clients from that church. So I ended up meeting the marriage pastor at that church, and I've done some work with them over the past, well, before COVID, probably 2018 on 2017. So I partner with churches a lot, but in full disclosure, not every church I've worked for has been awesome. There's been some, and there's no perfect church. That's not what I'm talking about. Because we're all imperfect people. But I worked at some churches that were really good. Everybody's got dysfunction, right? Just like every family.
Mm-hmm.
Every family's got dysfunction. My kids are probably going to have to go to therapy because of something I've done. I'm sure it's going to, but every church has got dysfunction. Every family's got dysfunction. So it's not about that, but it is about how leadership in that church works. And every church denomination handles those things differently too, right? So there's some differences there. So in this class right now, the possibility that every person here goes to a different type of church that's led differently is pretty high, right? I'm going to make some assumptions that everyone here goes to a church that maybe is a little different than other people's church, which is, again, that's normal too. That's not a big deal. But I do want to talk about a couple of these things tonight. So we're going to look at question number 2, which is describe a barrier to change that you've seen demonstrated in the local church. That's a very important question. I don't know if you guys know this, but churches don't change super fast. Kind of like the academic world too, right? We get stuck on traditions, and some traditions are fine, but when we do need to make changes, it doesn't often happen fast. And I want to talk about the first question too, to discuss at least 3 ways you see yourself using family ministry in the future. That question I originally thought we would do in groups, but we might just do like a big group discussion with everybody here tonight. I'm not going to make everybody do question 4 or 5 because that's more personal for you, talking about strengths and weaknesses yourself. But those first 2 we're going to hit tonight. I wanted to talk about those, especially that barrier to change question. And my goal here is not to throw churches under the bus. It's actually the opposite. I actually want us to be productive with a conversation about, hey, we know there's going to be certain barriers, so let's just talk about it. It's okay. It's the same thing I would do this discussion, and I have done this discussion before. In the same way I do discussions when I work with clients when they start talking about their childhood. There's a misconception in therapy that you should only focus on all the bad things that happened to you in childhood. And that's a good way to keep negative patterns alive. We need to also talk about things that were good too. And so the same thing with churches. Yes, there's barriers, but there's also probably things that will help get us across those barriers too. There's probably both things. We just need to, know where they are. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay. I never want to throw a church under the bus, or this is not what this is about. We want to be, we're trying to do something that is, and this is just probably more my mindset. I'm a little bit more optimistic and positive on the positive side. But I have definitely had some interesting conversations when I was in ministry that were pretty tough. At the same time, I had significantly more great conversations, and significantly more great experiences too. So, but we'll talk about all that. Okay. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. I have no idea how long that'll take. It might take an hour, could take an hour and a half. I don't know. We're just going to kind of go. There's one other thing I might do tonight. That if we get past these first two discussions, we might talk about, because one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we at least talked about in the class, because there's not really a assignment about it. One of the competencies of this class is to look at, and I kind of think this is important. How do you partner a family ministry with, say, local counseling services? And we don't really have an assignment around that. That's part of a competency. I actually wanted to talk about that too. If we don't do that tonight, our very last class will probably talk about that for sure, because I think that's important as well. One of the reasons is because there's a difference between pastoral or biblical counseling and care and therapy and counseling. Those are not the same thing, and they're very different. There's places for both of them, but they're very different. And sometimes this is the way I kind of have talked about it before with people and churches when I've talked to them. We can't pray away everything. Some things we need to get people help with in specific things, but we still want to pray, right? So we can't pray away stuff. We still want to pray, but we also want to be smart and say, hey, I know some really good, competent people I can send people to help them heal, and whatever they need to do to help themselves in their life. So I might talk about that tonight, but I bet we won't get to it. But we will for sure talk about that next time. I'm basically going to pack a bunch of stuff in because we missed our first class. So having said those two things, what we might end up doing, I might do this next weekend. I'm not 100% sure yet. What I've done in the past, I did this last summer. I did it on accident, but it worked really good. What I did in the past is I had what I called office hours on a Saturday, where people could show up and ask questions about anything that's going on in the class. I might actually do that as a replacement for the class that we missed. And again, I'll figure that out by the end of this week and see if that's something we want to do. And it'll be available, but not mandatory. It'll just be something you can do. Okay, so let me ask one opening question, and this is just a open-ended question. How far along in the book has everyone gotten? I'm just curious. And I'm not looking for a certain amount. I'm just curious. Michelle, you're saying chapter 4?
I've got this 8 going back and forth in between each chapter, looking at different stuff.
Okay.
And I'm on chapter 7, commitment and family foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm about halfway through.
And I should be.
Yeah, and again, please don't, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I really just legitimately want to know.
I'm at 7 too.
See, I didn't like this book.
All right, so that's what I was about to ask. This is why I'm asking.
I've
Brittany, what
really
reason?
I'm on 19, but
All right, Brittany likes the book. Brittany likes the book.
Right now.
I'm gonna catch up. I'm just
I didn't know.
That's okay. No, I want to know about it. This book is dated. If y'all don't, I mean, it's
Yes.
still good. There's still some good things in
Yeah.
there. Brittany, help me talk to me a little bit about what you like, because I mean, if you read that far,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
I think I'm just in the stage where I'm just very curious about and have come a long way in my understanding of dysfunctionality in families. I grew up and didn't know my family was dysfunctional. And so I'm just like digging in, searching for like, what is health?
Okay.
This have been really helpful for me to just explore.
Okay.
So yeah.
Good. All right. You're going to want to read this next, Brittany. If you really want to dig in, now I'm going to give you some of this little more meat, but this is a really good book.
I can't see who it's by. What is that?
So it's Friedman, Edwin Friedman.
Okay.
Okay, so this has been around for a while. This is a new updated version. Like the first time I read it was in the 90s. It's been around for a while. It's very, very good.
Awesome.
I read it in my seminary classes, and I read it in my marriage and family therapy classes. That we use it for both, because it's frankly just very good at talking about what you're saying, what you're looking at, and just looking at processes, and it talks about churches too. So it's good. It's a very good book.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And the other, I don't have it here because someone took it from me and I can't find it. I think my brother's got it. I need to go to his house. He lives like right across, like over there. I
You
need to
never
get it.
never let anyone have your.
I know. I just listen. I give books out, and I'm so stupid because then some of them I don't get back. There's another book about boundaries, by Townsend. It's like the original book on boundaries. It's been around for a long time. That is a great book to read, and it would apply to multiple situations.
Mhm.
Okay. So Brittany, I'm glad you like the book. That's awesome. And there's lots of parts of this book I like. The reason why I'm asking is because this book is a little bit older, but there's not a lot of books out there for like on the topic, which is kind of the problem. And so I'm just kind of wanting to know what y'all think about the book. And there's no guilt there's nothing. I just want to know what you guys think.
I'm not a fan of textbooks, but actually I like this one. I find it very readable, and I when I saw the thing about Bill Hybels in there, I thought, well, this is an old book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Good. Okay. Good.
I take it. To me, it's just the extension because I've had family in my regular counseling classes,
Mhm.
of course, on family, and so to me, it's just the extension of what I've already, taken before
Okay.
and read. And by my husband already, my husband is a minister,
Mhm.
so I've read some of the books he has on family ministry and stuff. So
Yeah. Good. Okay. Good. Anybody else?
It was an easy read. It's not that hard to
Right.
read,
Mhm.
and it has some great points. Talking about family and talking about different relationships. I mean, the troubled family. I think I stayed in that little section a little bit because I got some troubled families members,
Mhm.
and it was really pretty good.
Good. Okay. Good. Good. Well, and the other reason why I ask is when this is the first time I've taught this class, and whenever I first teach a class, I usually use what's always been used, but then I might tweak some stuff, and so you guys are kind of guinea pigs a little bit. The first class usually is, so I usually want to know like how things go and if we need to change things up. It's very hard to find a good textbook in general that covers, a wide range of topics. That part's hard. As I was reading a couple of things today, there were a couple of questions that have always popped out to me when we talk about families. And this question has been on my mind for probably 15 or 20 years. When we talk about like a legacy of faith, like how you pass faith down from generation to generation, and the way in which it happens now versus 50 years ago is very different. I think pretty different. There's an article that came out recently, maybe last week or the week before, about foundational beliefs, and they did it kind of by generation. We're past millennial. We're like into like X and Y. Like we're talking about people born in the 2000s and up, or mid 2000s. Just foundational beliefs that are different now, or maybe not as accepted as they have been in the past, and how that will potentially change how faith is transmitted down. And it's hard to find people that are really good research in these areas, but there are a few people. And one book I found, and it's probably maybe 7 years old now, but it's a pretty good book. And I've actually just started reading it. I'm like 50 pages in. It's called Faith and Families. Let me get out of the way so you can see that. I just happened upon this book, but it attempts to answer this question of how faith is passed down. There's another one that I have. I think it's in my other room, but there's another one that's similar to that. I think this does a good book of at least bringing up some really good questions about that kind of legacy. And so let me go over a little bit of a background history of some of this. I was talking about this for like the early 90s, like mid 90s, youth ministry started to become more organized in a lot of ways. And so as a result of that, and maybe it's probably a combination of like mega churches really started to become a thing in the early 2000s. And then kind of the non-denominational movement, we saw a lot of, we saw movements of people that were becoming less loyal to a denomination and would just be more likely to move to and go to church, like, at a community church or a Bible church, or, and that happened in the Catholic Church first. And then it started happening in the other, like Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Episcopal. They started pulling people from those denominations into, whereas now most of your mega churches are in the non-denominational vein, even though they might have like Southern Baptist roots maybe, or, they might have roots somewhere else. Like Martin was talking about Bill Hybels, that, Saddleback is another example. They have Southern Baptist roots, but definitely come across as more of a non-denominational kind of vein. And that started happening. Well, one of the things that also started happening is around like the mid 2000s, there started to be more research done in the area of, kids that would go through middle school, high school, do youth ministry, go to college, and then that would be it. Now we're talking about a lot of Gen X-ish and millennial, but Gen X, like my generation, we're doing this first, kind of pulling away, and then coming back when they had kids was kind of like what was happening for a while. And so there was a lot of research starting to be done about it, like why is it happening? You know, what's going on? And you got a lot of theories ran around. Purpose-driven church came out. That was a big purpose-driven life, purpose-driven church, purpose-driven everything, you name it, like, right, purpose-driven whatever, fill in the blank, came out. And it came out to give more structure to, you know, ministries that traditionally didn't have a lot of structure. Well, as we get into the late 2000s, then family ministry is definitely something that was happening. I got interviewed for a job by two different churches in two different parts of the state that had decided they wanted to combine somehow. They didn't really know how they wanted to do it yet because no one had really done it. They wanted to combine like the youth ministry, children's ministry, young adult ministry kind of in a ball and find a way to kind of bring parents into that ball. Like the two churches I interviewed with that was what their discussions were. And this would have been in like 2012 or 13, something like that. So that's not super long ago. So this idea of a family life ministry, the idea has been around for a while. Like this book's been around for a while. The idea has been around for a while. I'm just not super sure of a lot of churches that have figured it out because there's a lot of moving parts to it. Does that make sense? And so when we come to now, I think one of the things, and this goes back to that original question we were talking about, the model of family ministry. That model more than likely is going to have to incorporate different things, right? If we think about it, I think some churches have decided, hey, we're going to go all in on young people, and that's going to drive the bus. Children, youth, young adult, and that's kind of driving the bus. The church I work with in Keller, they do that, but they have gone all in on marriage ministry, and they really, really focus on marriages, not just people that are married, but like premarital counseling. And they're doing a lot of blended family work right now, like people that are remarried, blending families. That's the direction they're going. Like they just picked, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to do it well. We're going to try to help as many people as we can. So they have 3 campuses, and all 3 campuses, that's what they do. And I'm sure other places do it, going to do it a little bit differently. We've always had children's, youth, young adults. We've always had that. That's not new. But how do we and should we start doing some kind of a mix of all of this? And what would that even look like? Those were the questions that were being asked as I was leaving ministry in the late 2000s, early 2010, 2012. Those are the questions being asked that we're still kind of asking now. Does that make sense? I'm giving you like a little bit of history, a little bit of kind of this is what's been happening, kind of what's been going on. And this has been pretty true with every denomination. There's definitely some denominations that have bounced back better than others when it comes to people leaving. Like, when you get through college and people leave and they come back, some have bounced back better, some haven't. And there's some of them are struggling, some of them aren't. So that's definitely happening too. I think the overall numbers of church attendance has gone down significantly over the last 6 or 7 years. COVID didn't help that, but it was happening before COVID. Right. So that's just another kind of variable to think about. Does that make sense? I was going to do this for the first class. This is like an overview. Like this is like thinking broad. We're talking about super broad picture of what's going on.
That's mostly, as you say, happening because a lot of people. But can I say, your description is for bigger towns, big cities.
Yep.
now for small cities where I can relate, and rural area churches, that'd be a big problem.
Yep.
Because in smaller towns and rural towns, like you say, when people go off to college, they graduate from high school, go off to college, or get a move to another town, they never really come back. So in smaller churches and in rural areas, what you have left in the church as a congregation is mostly middle age and older. And
Right.
then if you don't have any couples that are having children, then the youth children that's in the church, and like you said, once they get teenagers or whatever, they stop coming or they move away. And so then all you have in the church left is middle age and elderly.
Right.
So you really can't incorporate a family model ministry. And like you say, backlash, because a lot of smaller churches, rural churches, they don't think it's necessary for developing any other how we put it, programs or
Yeah.
or ministries, because like you say, then they so used to the tradition and they don't want to change,
Right.
and they feel like, what's the need?
Right. Well, to your point, Angela, here, think about this for a second. This is a great point you're bringing up. There's been a migration away from small places to cities. So in the next 71 years, this just came out yesterday. In the next 71 years, the largest metropolitan area will be DFW, 33 million people. Bigger than LA, bigger than New York, bigger than San Francisco. The top 3 largest metropolitan areas will be in Texas. This is a prediction. If everything holds true as what's happening now, the trends that are happening, and most of those people are moving to big cities, even if it's a suburb, right? It's still
Yes.
part of a big city. Like, for example, I grew up in a very rural area of Texas that has not changed any in terms of size. It's been the same since I left almost 40 years ago. It's the same size, same size school, everything, right? It's not going to get bigger. It might get a little bit smaller. But where I live now, we've already doubled in size since I moved here 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we're actually a suburb of a suburb. I live in Van Alstyne, which is basically a suburb of McKinney. McKinney's a suburb of like Frisco, Allen, Plano. Plano is a suburb of Dallas, right? So there's suburbs of suburbs, right, that are happening. And so that, to your point, that's a great point. Here's another thing to think about. When we think about sizes of congregations, there was an interesting article that I read back in the mid 90s that I have just now kind of gone back to in my own kind of thought process that I thought was this is horrible to admit, that I thought was so stupid when I read it. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. Eugene Peterson, who wrote the Message Bible, was a pastor of a very small church for his whole ministry life. I think 150, 200 people. He wrote this little article that one of our professors made us read, and we had to discuss it, and we were all like, this is so dumb. He said that really a church of more than 150 to 200 people is really not as effective. And you really shouldn't have more than 200. I think he capped it a lot, like 300 people, but it was like that 150, 200 range. When I first read it, I thought, well, this is stupid, because back then the move was to grow. Like the first thing I read in ministry, going in marriage and family therapy classes, was basically like, we need to grow, we need to get bigger. That was like the goal, get bigger, get faster, all those things. right? Have more Angela mentioned programs. Have more programs, cater your programs. I look at that now and I think he's onto something. Because you can do a lot with 150, 200 people. When I say a lot, I mean relationship wise. And what I wonder is, and now I'm just being, this is my own, I do a lot of wondering. This is a wonder. I'm kind of wonder about this. Angela, what you described in terms of like older congregations or have, when I say older, I mean, maybe there's middle-aged to older adults in the congregation, maybe not as many kids. That's true. That's actually absolutely happening. One of the things that's interesting about that is I wonder if there's room for generational type family ministry where we have multiple generations involved and not just one or two generations. And that's kind of what I wonder. And I think about what Eugene Peterson was saying, and that it's a fairly interesting comment that he makes, that you can really get to know people better when there's not as many of them. But not just that, there's almost this mandate that's given to believers to mourn with those who mourn and celebrate with those who celebrate. And it's hard to do that with 5,000 people. It's easier to do it with 50 or 20 or 10, which is why we have small groups. That's why small groups started, for that reason. But if you think about it, could a family ministry incorporate more of a generational approach versus a silo approach? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I live in Tennessee now, but we moved here from Shreveport, and we were part of like a startup church, and we had about 220 members, and Shreveport's pretty transient. Like there's the Air Force Base there. And so people are coming in and out, and there's a medical school, and, just, it's kind of people come and go.
Yeah.
And so we spent 10 years there, and it was like a really hard city to live in, but it was like probably some of my life's best memories, because we were part of this church that everyone would always say, like, it was called Clearview, but people would say, like, when they came to Clearview, like they just wanted to sit in the back and, like, go to church and come home, and they couldn't help but like get pulled in. And I mean, we had, speaking of intergenerational like ministry, like we had intentional things, like, and I always like, this is like something that when I was told this by a dear friend, her name's Ruth, she's 65, but she told me once that like she made it a point, because there's so many Air Force families, that her personal ministry with her husband was like, I'm going to be the grandparent to a bunch of the kids in the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And like, she would go to grandparents' day or like show up at school and like have lunch with the kids for the kids that didn't have grandparents. And I was like, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. I'm going to do this for someone when I'm older, but, because she did that, like it caused so many of those families to become more intentional with their time, and like, like in spending time with the older members. And it was just like, I didn't notice it in the moment, but looking back now, I live in a small town in Tennessee outside of Chattanooga. And like not everyone, but there's like 3 churches up here. And, I mean, I don't know how my church is huge now, and we're so much less plugged in, but it was such an intentional, like sweet time of life. And I don't know, but it was like intentional, but it wasn't, because like, it wasn't these like perfectly placed programs necessarily. It was just like a lot of people that got very close doing life together. And it was, I don't know.
Well, and I think what you're saying is interesting, because I mean, at our base level, neurologically, like we're wired for connection.
Mm-hmm.
We're not wired for isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean that we personality wise don't need time alone sometimes, or, need to kind of recharge. But in general, we're wired for like, not just like we're connecting right now virtually, and that's okay. However, it'd be better if we were together, right? If we were in person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we would, if we were talking to each other in person, and we could shake hands, or we could, laugh, or, whatever, just even disagree, whatever it was.
Yeah.
we're wired. That's the way our brain works,
Mhm.
and it's worked that way for a long time, long time. And so, to your point, I think it's just a fascinating thought, is what I'm saying. It's and I was thinking about this today, like thinking about the class tonight, um, and I think it kind of started with, I guess it was Michelle that asked that question about, hey, they're models of ministry. Man, what could you dream up? Like, what is, in other words, what I just described to you is kind of like a passion for me. What's your passion, right? Like, what's your passion for a family ministry? And again, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's like, can we dream this right now? And it's okay to dream stuff, right? It's okay, you know, God gave people dreams all the time. Some dreams were crazy stuff, like crazy dreams. Like, and some people, they'd wake up and think, well, this, I can't do that. You know, most I don't. I often wonder, like Moses was told, hey, you're going to go get all these people. You're going to get them, and you're going to take them across a desert somewhere else. All of them, not some of them, all of them. And his first thought was, I can't do that. Well, it's interesting because I heard someone teach on this one time about the burning bush, and it made me think, how many times did Moses walk by that bush before he stopped? He could have walked by that bush a lot. God was just waiting. Or maybe it was that day. I don't know. But my point is, what's your passion? What is there a dream or a passion that God has put inside of you that you're like, hey, this is your chance to do that. This is your chance to say, here's what I think would be kind of cool, and here's why. And here's and do this for me. If you don't do anything else, don't try to make it perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. This dream or this whatever you think of in terms of model or how you want to do it, this is not about being perfect. This is about, hey, here's what I think. This would be kind of cool if we did it. Right? Like if I were to be asked tomorrow, hey, go do something with this intergenerational idea you have. I have zero idea how I would do it, but I think I could figure it out. We could figure it out. What's your passion, right? What's your dream? Where do you want to go? Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Hopefully. Okay. So this is what I want to do right now. And this is kind of going back to that. I told y'all we're going to get a head start on these questions. This is that model question. We can thank Michelle for asking it. She's the one that got this going. I want to know what you guys think. What model of family ministry? What are you thinking? And again, there's no right or wrong. We're just, do you guys want to do this in little groups, or do y'all want to just do it all together? What do y'all feel more comfortable with? It doesn't matter to me.
All together.
Okay.
All together,
Good.
because it's not
Yeah.
very many.
Yeah, that's what I'd rather do that. But I always am mindful of some people like smaller groups and they don't like talking, which you don't have to talk. But what is when you think about a model like a family ministry, like, again, it's that passion. It's that God has put something in you for, like, God is doing something. What is it? What do you think?
Dr. Berry, can I say something? I was
Yeah.
after what Jennifer said when she mentioned she come from a dysfunctional family. I did as well. And so when my husband was called into the ministry, and he was the assistant pastor at one of our home churches. Because of coming from a dysfunctional family, I tried to get the church, convince the pastor them to incorporate youth at risk ministry for children that didn't have anyone to show them love and was less fortunate enough that they couldn't attend to different functions like other children that had both parents in the house or whatever. I always wonder why I had wanted to gravitate to, I wanted to show children, other children, that you're not alone, even though you
Mhm.
might be having a hard time. And I think that's
Mhm.
why I went into counseling. And that's
Mhm.
usually what I used to work with, to let
Mhm.
them know someone else cares for you,
Mhm.
and it matters to children when they don't have anyone to show up. You know how you go
Mhm.
in elementary school and you have a program or something, and you might be participating on a program, and then you be looking for a family member or somebody that you
Yeah.
know in the audience, and then you looking around and you don't have any. But once a child has that and they see a familiar face,
Yeah.
it's heart wrenching when you just see that big old smile. You show up for them, and then they have this big old smile on their face,
Yeah.
like, hey, this is somebody that kept their word to me, said, well, I'll show up for you, and then they did.
Right. Yep.
So I had the thought that Michelle had, and I kept saying, okay, exactly what family ministry is talking about. And
Mhm.
as far as children, they always are my first concern as far as when dealing with the church.
Yeah. Good. So a lot of what you're talking about is that specifically um, kids that maybe don't have the most functional home life, and that's a very, very specific thing for you.
But you can still, to me, my thinking, as you say, dream, intergenerational,
Hmm.
because you do have, you can still, intergeneration, you can still use other, like, family member, a male for the young men,
Hmm.
the little boys that
Hmm.
don't have a male figure that to lead them or
Right.
teach them how to be a man or how to respect a woman. But then you also, because when I was 19 and was married, I was joined the matron group. And
Hmm.
I was the youngest something in it. Everybody in the matrons was old enough to be my grandmother.
Right.
But I learned,
Right.
like what Titus say, the book of Titus say,
Hmm.
old women supposed to teach the young women. And they did. I learned from them. I learned how to be a wife. I learned, but
Hmm.
even before I had children, I learned how to be a mother and how to take
And
care of
you learn from how.
from the older women.
Right.
Even though they didn't treat me like, they didn't talk to me like I was their daughter. They talked
Right.
to me like another woman, even though I was 19.
Right. Right.
So they
Right.
didn't, they didn't sugarcoat it. They didn't hide anything from me. They
Right.
talked about their experiences, and even to this day, some of them gone, and that's been over what 40 some years ago, and I can
But you
still remember.
but you're talking about finding a group that was very accepting of you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
why can't we do that in the intergenerational
Why can't we?
model?
Yeah. Why
Because
can't we? We can. I totally agree. I think we can. I totally agree. I actually think that we have gotten too siloed to a certain extent and separated out age groups too much to a certain extent. So I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
My
I
church just finished, sorry, Michelle,
Go,
you,
go on.
my church just finished up like a 7-week series on sexual brokenness. And during that time, they had intergenerational meetings every Tuesday where you could just come and chat about the service and chat with the pastor and the family ministry leader and kind of just open discussion. And there were people from 18 to like mid 80s. And it was incredible. It was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. People just talking openly about a sensitive topic, gaining compassion, and understanding each other when they were just, there's such a huge generational gap.
Mhm.
It was cool.
But do you
But-
think it was like that because of the topic, or because?
Well, potentially. I mean, I think our church also craves it. So I think the older people in our church are craving interaction from and knowledge from younger people. And I know I certainly crave interaction and knowledge from older people. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I think we're, as a church, going to hopefully see more of that because it was so well recepted,
Right.
or so that people are just like, well, what's next? What other topics are we going to go after?
So maybe it wouldn't matter the topic necessarily.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. I mean, it's an interest. I mean, I don't know if you could have picked a more difficult topic
No, it was
than that
incredible.
one.
Was difficult.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Where do you live, Brittany?
Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I lived in Northern Virginia for 8 years. That's the last place I worked. Around DC, close to DC. Yeah. Okay. Actually, some of my best friends were born and raised in Roanoke. Actually,
Okay.
so
Yeah, about an hour or so from DC.
yeah, I've been there a few times. Yeah, cool. All right. Anybody else?
I was just gonna say that there was a church that I attended, and when I go to my parents' hometown in Tyler, and I really liked that church because they were family oriented. They had, even though the children were separated, the youth were separated. They had a marriage, as most people do, and then they also had events for family. So on a regular basis, especially in the summer, you would go to UT and swim. Before Bible study, you're in the church's kitchen and having dinner. At first it was free. Then I think they started charging.
Too many people.
Yeah. And so they were intentional about having events, having bonfires and things like that. So I thought that was really, really, really good to do. So and the culture is family oriented.
Right.
And so I know, like my family, they were just like, why are you riding all the way over there to go to this church? This is this. And I had relatives that were pastors, and I was like, this is where I feel comfortable.
Right.
And so when I go back, because I lived there for about 6 months. And then I came back here to Michigan. I thought I was going to live there for a while. And so when I come there every summer, it's just like I just fit right back in. And so it's at the door. I mean, from the time that I found them on Facebook, and from the time that you greeted at the door, it's just, I mean, nothing but family and love.
Yeah.
And so, and it was a diverse church. And so I don't know how many members that they had there, but it was a nice size church. And my family is used to a small, very, very small church. So I was just like, I said, this is not that big. I said, I lived in Houston. That's a big, those are large churches.
Yeah.
And so like, you going over there to that big church, this is this. And I was like, it's not that big.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it wasn't, like I said, I thought they did a really good job of, for every ministry. I mean, I work with the youth, and because I had been in ministry before, as soon as I got there, they were just like, hey, jump in. And so like I said, I really, like I said, when I'm in town, I'm there.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting concept of thinking about home, what home is or what home feels like when you feel like you're
Mm-hmm.
like a place like feels like home, even if
Mm-hmm.
you're not in a place you grew up necessarily. It could be there too, but there's an article that I read a few years back about it was just entitled Home Place. It was actually a therapy article that was a technique that you use in therapy to help people visualize something. Anyway, it's kind of a grounding technique. But the idea is that um, we when we find a home place, there's something about it becoming relaxing, and there's something about it being like it feels accepting and relaxing and just kind of there's a feeling to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? More than just it's not necessarily just uh cognitive or emotional. It's like both things
Right.
together. And when you find it, you find it, right? You know that it's there. And then you want to repeat it. Like if you can repeat it and create that space, um, then you'll drive to go be part of it.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
And so I'm not at a church right now.
Yeah.
I'm in between churches. And so my town that I'm in right now, Saginaw it's a small town like Tyler, but Tyler, is grown so much.
Yeah.
And so my little town, I've been in one, I was at one church for about 7 years, and then I was at one for some years. And like I said, it's just different. I mean, I don't mind being at a small church, but the growth in the mindset, and the organizational pieces and things like that. And you're just like, okay, well, how come there's no one over this ministry? How come this is not in place? And this. So, especially in 2023, 2022, and it's just like, okay, so I know there's, like you said, I know there's no perfect church, but there are some things that you're just like, okay, why are we, behind on some things? And one of the things I did say as a barrier were the lack of leadership, lack of people who want to step up. I saw that in the church I was attending,
Hmm.
lack of leadership that don't want to step up in a small church.
Yeah.
And so, when someone comes in, and they want to, they're in leadership, a lot of times it provokes the other people to step up, because that's what I saw when I was here. When
Right.
I started teaching Bible study, then it was like, okay, this person wanted to start teaching and this
Right.
person wanted to
Right.
start speaking. So you start
Right.
provoking people to, if you've been here for so many years, the church is supposed to make disciples. And so you can't just sit on the word. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping I can find somewhere quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. Anyone else want to share?
Um, well, I had an interesting week this week. I could start from yesterday because my line of work is dealing with public housing residents and a lot of youth and broken families. And I had this one family that kind of encouraging me or leading me through to this path when I look at my question.
Hmm.
Um, he was 14. His him and his mother was having disputes, and he had a restraining order on her. And he went to stay with his grandmother, and his grandmother couldn't handle him, so he had to go back to his mother.
Hmm.
So his dad was on dysfunctional, away on drugs or something. So he couldn't go to him, and he had no other family. So he went back to her, and they had a confrontation. So she went to jail because he's in our house. So I had
Right.
to call a missionary and get with the school, the missionary, the social service department to see how we can handle this case because it was so sensitive. Because she called me, wanted to remove him from her family. And I
Mhm.
saw the age and I was like, wait, he's just 14. What's going on?
Mhm.
And we kind of structured that around the missionary, the guy that came from the church.
Mhm.
And so he's going to get a group and get with the sports, get with the team, because we asked him, what do you want? What do you want to do? And we're giving her parenting classes,
Mhm.
other different classes that she can take to anger management
Mhm.
and other things, so we can get the family whole unit involved, so we can get this, because this is a mess.
And that's
And
just one family,
that's just one family.
right?
But I have several families in not extreme situations,
Mhm.
but in situations.
And that's a good example, Stacy, to me, of in this again, when we think about a ministry, like a ministry, it doesn't have to be inside the church walls, right? It could be outside,
Right.
and sometimes we can be the most effective outside. Michelle said something too that like this the commission to make disciples. That specific verse is very interesting because it what it says is while you're going or while you're living, make disciples. It's not directed toward a church.
Yeah.
It's directed towards people, like
Mhm.
disciples. So it's not necessarily just like in a church context we do this, right? It's actually like in a church context, yes,
Right.
that kind of makes sense that you would do that. But outside the church context, like why would how you stepped in to help this 14-year-old, why would that not be considered making disciples too?
Right.
Right. And in this case, we're saying, hey, this ministry can be more than just inside the walls. Does that make sense? I think that's,
It does make sense.
yeah. And that's just one, like I said, that's just one family.
It's just one family.
Yeah.
But we're going to try to do our best to make this family whole.
Yeah. Well, and you don't know what you're going to do for him. You have no idea how that will impact him,
Yeah.
you know, as he gets older and looks back on it. Because
Right.
at 14, you don't really know when someone's doing something for you.
Right. You
You know.
really don't. But he's a bright kid
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he has so much potential.
Hmm.
So we're just going to tap into that.
Yeah. Good. Good. Yeah, that's good. Anyone else? Maybe one more person. And because I'm going to jump on to a couple of these other questions too.
Can I say something about what Michelle said?
Yeah.
Uh, I was laughing when she was talking. I don't know, because I can't see my own self. But she mentioned when she started teaching a class and people that wasn't doing, they stepped up, because a lot of people be in smaller churches, they don't want you to come in and they feel like you're trying to take over.
To change stuff. You don't want to change anything.
Yeah. You shaking up stuff because
you are.
when my husband started, when he got his first church, even though I fought him being a past preacher, and some of the older ladies, if they got an attitude, okay, like the Lord's Supper, they wouldn't even serve the Lord's Supper. And so I started doing it on a regular basis. And one of the older ladies got ticked. And she just came to me one Sunday and I was doing the Lord's Supper. You're just trying to take my place. So a lot of times they don't want to change, but then when a newcomer come in, then they feel intimidated. And that's why the church don't grow. Because like with Stacy, we're mandated. it's not only mandated, we commission according to the scriptures that we supposed to help someone else along the way when we can, and we are our brother's keeper. And so I pray that you find a church that will accept you and accept the gifts that you have to offer. But most of the time, they're intimidated by you. That's the biggest thing.
Well, we love gifts over here at our church.
And you know what?
It's Rockwall Friendship Baptist Church. We
That's
love
that's a
gifts.
commute for you.
Right. I'm in Michigan, so it's just like, oh,
Yeah, that's
Well, you can go
that's a-
online.
that's a commute.
yeah.
Well, let me ask this too, because this will be a good place to bring it up. I am going to put you in groups for this one because I want you to talk about it, and then we'll come back and talk about it together. Um, I do want to talk about barriers. And any barrier, like Angela just brought, it's a great segue, Angela. There's going to be barriers to change anytime you do something new. And that, because that's a human nature thing. That's not just churches, that's just
Right.
people. I've worked with people intimately for over 25 years. And the one thing that there's a couple of things I know for sure. People are going to do whatever they want to do. And even when they really want to change, it's really hard. So you got to really want to change. And there's also a certain percentage will traditionally accept change quick. And then there's about 67% of people that gonna mull it over for a while. And then there's that lagging 20% that probably maybe never really won't ever get there. And so what I'd love for you guys to talk about in your groups is any barriers to change you've seen in any churches you've been into. And that could be any kind of change. I mean, it could be anything. I remember when the last church I was at, we were going to hire, this is a long time ago. We were going to hire a worship minister to coordinate, because our church didn't just do worship services. We did like I did youth rallies where I had worship people do stuff. We did various things all year. And so we wanted to hire someone to kind of coordinate that, but also lead the worship part of kind of be a pastor to that part of our church. Man, you thought that we were going to try to, bring snakes in and burn the church down. I mean, it was unbelievable. The kind of things that happened. We lost elders. We had a couple of elders leave, and they actually sent some emails to some of the parts of the church. Some confidential emails were sent to parts of the church. I mean, and we're talking about just something that and we ended up hiring him, and he was great, and it was great for our church. But there's always going to be barriers. Now that's a big one. That was a big, then there can be little changes. Like I wanted to hire more than 2 interns, and we'd always just hired 2, and you would thought that was like, I was asking for $1 million or something. It was like crazy. But there's always going to be barriers somewhere. So what are some barriers? It's literally this question number 2. Describe a barrier to change that you've seen demonstrated in a local church. And I want y'all to talk about that a little bit. Partly I'm going to put you in groups because I need to take a little break and go and get something to drink. I'm going to put y'all in groups for just a few minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about it. And again, we're not throwing people under the bus. This is not about that. But we need to talk about, like, what would barriers be to changes that you would want to make. Okay. So I'm going to put y'all in. Let's see if we can. Let's do it that way. So you should see it pop up on your screen there.
Okay.
To jump into. Did I cut anybody off?
Yes.
Yeah.
Came off.
They're
That's a
back.
yeah. That's the downside of the groups when it ends, it ends. That's it. That's it. Could y'all kept going?
Huh? Yeah, we could have kept going.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I like to do group discussions, and so what I kind of wanted to talk about was not just necessarily like barriers, but but how you would like. Are there ways that we can start kind of think about how we would work with them? So, did anybody want to share? I'm not going to make anybody share anything they don't want to share. Anybody want to share anything?
Well, can I finish telling Shelby what I was about to tell her?
Yeah, for sure.
And then you can also collaborate, Doc, because you've already you a counselor as well, and then you've been a youth ministry. We was talking about her school, so I was finna suggest you're doing the right thing. Good thing about getting your own LPC. If you can convince your district, that's what the school system did in Tulsa. They was outsorting with counseling agencies. And that's how I ended up going into the school systems that I went in, because they started a collaboration with the agency I was working for. And so, because the school counselor is not going to be able to handle all the students in the school at one time, because when something break out, okay, the school counselor might have to deal with one situation, but then you might have 2 or 3 situations that get out of hand all at the same time. So the school system, they outsourced for agencies to send counselors into the school system. They didn't necessarily have to come to the school. The student could also see the counselor at the office. They didn't have to necessarily let anyone know that they was seeing a counselor. So it still was privacy, but the student was still getting help, even though they wasn't being seen at the school. So you can think about doing something like that if your district would allow it. And the idea you have about getting your LPC and opening your own agency, that would be perfect. That you can help more than you could just being at the school every day.
Yeah, let me talk about that real quick. This idea of I don't know. I have an idea what you guys are talking about. When we start talking about partnering, I think I talked about this earlier about churches partnering with counselors. It is a little different when school districts do that, and the biggest difference is the confidentiality pieces, and that's a state to state thing. There's actually been a couple of new laws enacted in Texas about consent forms and confidentiality for school counselors, not even for OPC folks. But I never think it's a bad idea to have a go-to list of referrals for different things. Most good school districts have, just like good churches, will have a list of referral sources for mental health help. And I think that's very important. And I think that I was alluding to this earlier. We won't get to it tonight, but our next class, we're going to talk about this specific topic a little bit more, I think, in terms of like not just the need for it, but just how to do it well. I've got a couple of friends that I'm trying to get to come talk in this class, but I don't know if the schedule is going to work out. But anyway, but I think it's good to have a referral list. It's always good to kind of know who's on that list and vet that list, but that's always a good thing to have. Because sometimes that can be a barrier too. Like you might need help in a certain area and you just don't have, it's beyond what you can do, right? Like there's some things, like even me, I've been doing this for a while. There are definitely boundaries I have where I know I can't help people in certain areas, but I know people that do help people in those areas. And so it's just good to know what our own personal boundaries are. The one thing I'll say about mental health when it comes to helping people, and this is true for anybody that in any counseling situation of any kind, even if it's pastoral care, our job as people is not to make personal decisions for people. Like I don't make personal decisions for people. I don't tell people what to do. And I for sure don't make their decisions for them. That's too much. That's not on me. I can help people think and reflect and things like that, but our job is not to make those decisions. So what types of barriers have you guys seen or been around, or and I'd love to hear from some people we haven't heard from yet. Some people have been hiding, I think, a little bit, and that's okay. But I'd love to hear from some people that haven't spoken up.
I'll talk on behalf of our. We said, we iterated a few things that were already said and then added a few more. And to recap what's already been said is, we said there can be barriers to education. There can be barriers to within the age groups, like we said, we were talking about just as in the whole group before, in the class before, that you might have gaps in ages, and that can be a barrier. You can have a barrier to a lack of leaders and so forth. That was said already. And then I added, just so you have the context of what we were just talking about, that Angela was saying was, I was sharing that the barriers or the model that I'm thinking through, what I'm filtering through in my mind is not my church, because my church has a great program. It's already, it's in a constant state of evaluation. It's a large church, like at least 2,000 people, but they do an excellent job of making it feel really small. So what I'm filtering through is my current workplace environment, where we would benefit from a family ministry. And we're kind of at a stalemate because we weren't sure what is needed or how to bring about. And that's what I've been tasked with doing. And I'm the dean there at the school. It's a private Christian school. And so I said one barrier that we currently have is with multiculturalism, and everything else is kind of stopped until we can get past that. And I'm thinking through how I can use the work I'm doing in this class to help me set us up for success, to evaluate the needs of the campus, and including how do we equip parents and students and faculty and staff and so forth to have tough conversations with each other in a safe space, and then also move on to whatever else is the need of the campus to help the kids in a family way.
Do you have multiple cultures represented?
We do have multiple cultures, but it's kind of hard to explain. We have very few minorities. So there's few African Americans, few Asians, few Hispanics, few Native Americans, lots of Caucasian, and there's a lot of lack of education on how to interact with each other in a way that's not offensive from one culture to the next. And so that's become such an overarching thing right now that it kind of puts everything else in the back seat right now, because it's popping up in every grade level right now. And so, and I do see family ministry as a potential way to help with that, because you can equip parents to talk to their kids. You can help kids have a safe place to ask questions that are born out of sheer curiosity. You can have kids mentor each other. You can equip staff members to know when to speak up, when something is okay and you don't have to intervene, how to help kids talk through their own conversations with each other and work things out. So that's where my head was.
So you're so one of the so what I'm hearing is, well, let me ask it this way. Do you have a need that you're trying to fill? And that's what you're trying to figure out?
We do have a need because parents are baffled. They don't really know how to help their children. They're surprised that their children are saying what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's just such a touchy subject that everybody needs to walk on eggshells.
Gotcha.
Meanwhile, that we're not doing the kids a favor by
Gotcha.
not helping them.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I'm tracking. Okay. Okay. So there's a couple of things that there's a couple of things that might be, it sounds like her, like in this instance, I don't know how much a barrier, like a roadblock to what you're trying to do would be found in like social media type use.
Do you mean like social media could be spurring this on, the content they're getting from social media?
Well, yeah, I mean, so all right, I'm going on a rabbit trail, so just buckle up. Here's but one of the things that social media does a great job of, there's two things that it's really good at. The first one is it holds attention. All of the social media companies hired behavioral psychologists early in their development to help them learn how to hold attention, because that's how they make money. Social media companies are businesses. They want to make money, so they hold your attention. The second thing that they're really good at is not filtering out what may or may not be true. Just anything can be out there. Any of us right now can say, I don't, whatever, make up something, blah, 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 this is happening. It used to be YouTube. YouTube was the rabbit hole. YouTube is not the rabbit hole anymore. It's multiple things. It's not, there's no filter to it. So, and how that works is it basically, if you think about a social media feed, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram especially, how they work is whenever you look at something, there's an algorithm that is used to figure out what you like, and depending on how long you view that thing, it will keep feeding that feed. That's what you'll get in your feed, right? So if it's a certain thing that they're getting in their feed, then they're getting fed that constantly. The other thing about that is mostly our brain really likes negative things. And so we'll get a lot of negative stuff in our feed because of that. That's how our brains work. Now, there's a reason why our brain does it that way, but that's where the behavioral psychologists came into play. They know that, and they know how to get money into the company by feeding us with these things that may not be true, but are probably negative. In other words, most of our feeds aren't fluffy butterflies. It can be. My wife, her TikTok's full of dogs, like little puppies, and recipes, and Taylor Swift. And that's what she gets, those three things. With some stuff, and then they'll just throw stuff in there every once in a while, right? Like to pull our attention. So it keeps our attention, and it's a feed, and it's based on what we're looking at, and it's not filtered. So what could go wrong in a teenage mind with those three things? Well, I'll fast forward. What can go wrong in an adult mind with those? Because the adults are doing it. It's the adults that are doing it. It's not the teen. Does that make sense, Shelley, what I'm talking about? That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, it does.
That's all I'm trying to say, that is a potential. We didn't have this 15 years ago. We weren't worried about these things. If there was like a bullying situation, let's say, or a racially charged situation, let's say, back even 15 years ago, for the most part, it stayed at school. Now it goes with us because our phones go with us, and we carry it with us all the time, 24/7. Does that make sense? And everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's opinion is what? Valid. Y'all can make with that what you want, but that's it. Does that make sense? So that part is. I talk about this in one of my classes a lot more than what I'm doing right now, but this is a new thing, and this is a legitimate. I could see that being a legitimate barrier in what you're trying to do. Does that make sense, though, what I'm saying?
No, I do see.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that's the only thing. I'm just saying that it doesn't help. It doesn't help. If you put one or two things out, and that your feed can just grabs that stuff, and all of a sudden it reinforces what you're getting, and it becomes true, more and more true. It's almost like brainwashing to a certain extent. Same thing with news feeds. It's the same thing. They do the same exact thing. Yeah, all these companies hire behavioral psychologists early on. And this is not me, Chris, making this up. This is you can read about it. It's researched. There's a lot of really good research going into this right now. A lot. There's European countries that are starting to filter out and trying to get rid of certain social media sites because of that. Because of that very thing. Anyway, we're so far off topic now, but that's what I was thinking about. For sure.
Along with that was so I went to the CCEF trauma conference this past weekend, and they talked about the new generation and how basically our goal will be to teach them how to be human. And that is really interesting to me. But another barrier that I'm thinking about along those lines would be not thinking about the people, but thinking about the business and weighing too heavily on the formalities versus the heart kind of situations.
Well, and I think there's truth to teaching people to be human. I think part of the problem is the adults aren't always being human. We're not talking about kids here. The adults are doing this. We're talking about adults acting like knuckleheads, and that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, if there's a biblical concept that needs to be recaptured, to me, it is the fact that adults need to be in front of and say, okay, the adults are going to be in charge now. We're going to take this over, and we need to act appropriately. Right. And you can see that Jesus is consistently was an example of how to act. Just how to act. Even Paul and Peter did not get along that well, but they didn't demonize each other, and they didn't, they stayed on message together. They did not necessarily like each other that much sometimes. They were apart pretty much their whole ministries because for specific reasons. And that's true throughout history of our church, but it doesn't mean that we demonize the other person. And that's part of this is part of the issue that we're having too. I don't think there's anything wrong with disagreeing or, like everything I'm saying. If any one of you are like, I don't agree with anything you're saying, that's okay.
I think that's like a skill too that we've lost in like what you're saying, Brittany, about like teaching people how to be human. I think a lot of the reason we have so many issues right now and everyone's at social war with each other is because we don't know how to sit around a table and disagree. I mean, it's just, and that's like a skill to teach our kids, just basic life skill that, to disagree respectfully or to get upset about something and express your feelings and move on. I mean, just to be in community with people means the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
we've lost our ability to have what Aristotle, Socrates, I would call it civil discourse. You have a civil discourse of things that you might not agree on. If you think about it, Jesus discipled and let Judas travel with him for 3 years, knowing exactly what was going to happen. I mean, if you think about it, that would not happen now.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like that would be, and that's an extreme example, but it's an extreme example of, but Jennifer, what you guys are talking about. I mean, this, like, if you disagreed with me, any of you, that's fine. We can still go out and hang out. I mean, it's not going to bother me. It's okay. I might not like it, but it's okay.
Even further than that, like my sister, she's 6 years younger than me, and we disagree on a lot of things, spiritually, politically, all the things. But I mean, she's my best friend and I love her dearly, but like we just don't broach a lot of those subjects. Whereas I feel like, and that's okay, but like it's a shame because it's like I do feel like the truth is found in a lot of not arguments, but kind of, or tension or disagreements, like the truth you can find that way. And I think we miss a lot of opportunities to like grow by not getting a little ugly with each other. I mean, I think that's why some marriages are so fruitful when you can hang in there. And of course, with, to exclude like, major forms of, abuse and other things. But I mean,
absolutely.
Marriage can just be the most beautiful vision of that, is like you go through a journey and it's just impossible to be perfect and beautiful all the time, I think. I mean,
totally agree. Totally agree. That's absolutely true. I mean, God has been gracious with us for millennia. And we just keep fighting with each other. And, he's very gracious and very patient. And he is a great example of that. And actually, there's research, Jennifer, with what you're saying. The research behind marriage is that not the couples that learn to navigate the 3 to 5 things that they will never figure out. There's usually 3 to 5 things that every couple are going to struggle with for the history of their relationship. And the couples that learn to navigate those effectively are the most happy and have the most longevity. And this is not like, I think this is true. This is well researched, like longitudinal studies have bear this out. Like my wife and I cannot be on the computer together. Cannot. It doesn't make any sense. It's the dumbest thing. I love her. We've been together 30 years. She loves me. I love her. I cannot be on the computer with her. Cannot. It doesn't make any sense. We disagree on almost every parenting move to a certain extent, except for super basic things. But I take things and and she gets real frustrated and upset. I don't understand it, and she doesn't understand me, but we just know that, and
you move on.
we navigate it, and but that is a skill. It is a skill, and you have to intentionally build it too. So there's a form of therapy that speaks to this, and it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And the basis of it is that we accept something that's happening. And then once we accept it, then we can commit to moving forward. Now, we don't accept everything. I'm not talking about trauma and abuse. We're not
Yeah.
talking about that. We're saying, like, I've had multiple clients that come to me. I work with a lot with anxiety, a ton, probably 99% of everything I do is clients with some of it devastating anxiety. I've had multiple clients come to me and say, I want you to get rid of this. It's not possible. That's not how it works. Once you can accept that you're going to be anxious at some level, it's almost like all the weight's gone. But that is so hard to do, right? If we can accept that, there's a strong possibility that even in this call right now, there's going to be a disagreement about something, some subject that came up, right? We could, especially politics. I mean, we brought up politics or theology. We're not all going to agree. But if we could accept that, hey, I'm not going to agree with everything and you're not going to agree with everything. What if we accepted that just as like a baseline? Doesn't mean we don't talk about it, but what if we accepted it? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Once we accept something and we're like, okay, then that changes a little bit. Like neurologically, it actually changes your brain too. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's important. That's why we were kind of going back to barriers. Like when we talk about barriers, we need to accept that there's barriers, right? Like there's going to be something that's going to happen or come up that's just going to be in the way. It's just going to happen.
As you're talking, a barrier that comes to mind that seems to be a common thread amongst all of it, this we could make an argument for how it could be at the root of many of the things we just said, would be a barrier to fear. So
yeah,
like at the root of so many of these things. And so I think with creating a family ministry model or anything when you're trying to do something new is how to create a safe space for fear to be at least not over, it can be worked through more. So it's not
you can
going to
acknowledge it. Just acknowledge
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. And then work within
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Fear, first of all, fear gets a bad rap. Fear is important because it keeps us alive. First of all, the reason we have fear, our brain is created not to keep us happy, but to keep us alive. That is the base. That is what our brain is there to do. And it does it through fear. And having a fear is a natural, normal reaction. Now, if you allow it to become all of your reaction, that's can be unhealthy. But if we know that we're scared of something and we can acknowledge it versus we know we're scared of something, we just shove it down, it's going to come out somewhere. It has to. It can't stay like that. So like to your point, Shelley, creating a safe spot, a safe space, right? Where we can acknowledge it, talk about it, get it out. That's vital. That's vital. If you don't do that, then you can't make progress. Because our brains are wired for survival and they're also wired for connection, and they work best when those connections are safe. It'll work the best. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, even in this class, throughout all the discussions we've had, if anyone said something and I turned around and said, well, that's kind of stupid. Why are you saying that? Like if it was me as a student, I'd just leave. I mean, I'd be like, well, why would you say that? You know what I'm saying? Like just even in this class, you gotta be able to talk about, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like you have to create safety.
I always feel like I tell people with me, we can agree to disagree because your opinion is just as important as my opinion. So I'm with you. I don't get upset because we're two different individuals and we're never going to see eye to eye. But if we can come together and make a conscious decision, so what's the problem? And like I say, we all gonna have our own viewpoint on something. but that doesn't mean your viewpoint is no lesser than my viewpoint. But it's just we have different opinions about certain things, and I don't get upset. I just say, well, we can agree to disagree. But in church, that's a whole nother.
But that's my point, right? And that's my point. That's what I was driving at. Where should we be the most safe?
In church.
Is church. But my fear has been that it's becoming more judgmental and not less judgmental. Not everywhere. I'm not talking about universally, but our world is becoming that way. Whereas we all have an opinion, for sure, everyone has an opinion, and social media has allowed all the opinions to be said just anytime we want.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no more courage than anyone that has a keyboard in front of them. You got a lot of courage when you have a keyboard. It just goes with it. But now it's gone farther than that. People are doing that in face to face. My wife worked at a facility for 5 years that they did endoscopies, and so people are already grumpy because they had to fast, and then endoscopy is not fun. It is what it is. It's not fun. It's crappy, literally. So she worked there for 5 years. The amount of abuse that she took from people that came in was unbelievable. Unbelievable. People were angry. They would yell at her, scream at her. It was unbelievable. I was just taking, I kept telling her, baby, I'm like, you got to quit. You need to quit. She stayed there 5 years. I don't know how she did it. That's just one little place. But that's what's happening. There's a lot of anger, and some of it's because of, fear that's out there. Some of it. But in church, it's even it used to not be that way. There used to be a barrier, but that's happening in church too. That kind of stuff. Like I've seen it. Right? Now, having said that, barriers in church, I think, are a little bit different than barriers. Maybe, Shelly, for your school, I don't know. They might be the same just because of the environment. You got a tough job. That's going to be a tough job for sure. That's going to be tough. But, when we think about these barriers that we might face in church, like especially if we're starting something, as you think through like what you want family ministry to look like, it's just important that you are honest and open about the barriers that you are going to face, because you're going to face some. Now, on the flip side of that, and I didn't put this as one of the questions, on the flip side of that, you can always find heroes or champions for your ideas too. Like you can find people that support and love and are gung-ho about what you're wanting to do too. And that's important too. That kind of support is very important, I think. And so, but that barrier part is very important to think about. So, all right. So tonight, literally, we've answered at least 2 or 3 of these questions. Hopefully, or at least you got some ideas now about the direction you're going to go. So our next class will be, it's in November 15th. Yeah, November 15th, which is a Wednesday night. Well, we have to have it on a Wednesday night because that's when churches, it's a family ministry class. So you have to have it on a Wednesday because that's when you go to church. That's in the Bible somewhere that you go to church on Wednesday night. Matthew 30, verse 5. You go to church on Wednesday night. That's what everybody used to say, stuff like that. Is this helpful? This class is this helpful to your process? Hopefully.
Yes.
Like I don't want to meet for no reason.
No, this is very helpful.
No, whenever you have Zooms, they're helpful.
Good. Hey, thanks for showing up. If you're watching the recording, you missed out. Sorry, you're only watching it. You didn't get to participate. But we'll meet again in November, and I might try to have like an office hour time. Not this weekend, but next weekend. I just need to look. I don't have all my schedule up here, I need to look at one more thing, but I'll send a message out about that tomorrow. Now y'all go do something else.
And
Like,
I wanted to show you, excuse me, I wanted to show you all my shirt that I got. There was a therapist that was on a Bible study.
yeah,
And this is exactly what you said. Look, his shirt says, Jesus heals, therapy helps.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right.
And,
I like that.
and I was like, oh my goodness.
I like that a lot.
I
That's
said,
cool.
I never you know, you really don't think about that until you start going through certain things. You always depend on the church
Yeah.
because the therapy has never really been inside the church.
Mm-mm.
And so, no. No. And so I was just like, oh my goodness. I said, this stuff is real that we're going through in church.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we just, that's been a stigma for a long time, and hopefully it'll go away. Eventually it will. Maybe another 100 years or so it'll go away. It just
It
takes
has
time.
since COVID. It has since I've seen a lot of churches offering grief and all kind of counseling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah,
Since
COVID was basically a big trauma.
Yes, that's
A
exactly.
big trauma. Yeah, for sure. Okay, now I'm getting ready for Taylor Swift to drop her 1989 album. My wife and daughter, they're already ready. They're out there right now. I heard them
That's
all
right.
ago. Drops at midnight, just in case y'all wanted to know. It drops at midnight. All right. So
Okay.
we'll see y'all in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice night.
Night.
You too. You too.